even even descendants of enslaved individuals. This evening's meeting is on form and intent, focusing on, what is the message that we want to convey, or we hope to convey to folks, and what type of a design, what type of a physical memorial will best convey that message. We're glad that you're here this evening to help us sort this out as we all go along this journey together. So we have a lot of work to do tonight, and I'm going to get us started, but I would like to begin the meeting by asking Joy if she would do an opening prayer.
I'd be happy to. In the middle of this prayer, there'll be a little silence. Okay. All right. Let us pray. God of love and wisdom, who like a mother hen yearns to gather us under your wings, we thank you for the comfort of your presence in these hard days of war. Help us set aside the busyness of our days and the worries of this world for a time. May we be still and know that you are God. Oh God, we are grateful for this church and for one another. Make us attentive to both you and each other today. Guide us as we discern the next phase of this church's journey. We always seek to follow you. Amen. Amen. And I want to introduce Jadi, who's with the Mass team and has been leading us throughout. So take it away, Jadi.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joy. Such a lovely prayer. Thank you for that. And thank you, Dean, for offering some context for which I can then speak to and add to. Before I get started, can everyone see my screen? If you can give me a head nod, or okay, I'm getting some thumbs up. Oh, all sorts of things. Thank you for the diversity of responses. So as Dean has already clarified, we are in our third community engagement. Today's session will focus on form and intent. I am going to ask if everybody could please mute themselves. That would be very helpful. I'm getting a little bit of feedback. Thank you. I think that might have solved the problem. And of course, if anybody else notices that they're unmuted, just please mute yourselves until it's time to unmute yourself. So yes, at any rate, we are in our third session and we're going to focus on intent and form today. And we'll do that in two ways. I'll explain to you what that's going to look like in a moment. But first, I just want to let you know who is with you today. So from the Mass Design Group side, you have myself, Jadi Amazi. I'm a principal here at Mass. Chris Scoville, who is our design director, Morgan O'Hara, who is our manager of advancement and a historic preservationist, as well as Alejandra Enriquez, who is a senior designer and one of our lead engagement strategists. Unfortunately, Emily and Bibi are not able to join us today. Well, actually, it's not unfortunate. It's their blessing because they are currently in Rwanda visiting our Kigali team and having the time of their lives, I'm sure. So they've been there for 3 weeks now, and they will be returning back to this process soon enough. But in the meantime, y'all are in good hands with the team that's available. So our agenda for today is we're going to do a very high level review of session 2. And you will hear me reference in that review the PDF that should have been sent to you via email. I'm not going to read the screen. I'm not going to belabor some of the points. I will instead direct you to that PDF. If you have not received that PDF, then please reach out to someone that's on the committee. I would probably start with, Joy, Faye, Kathy, Miguel, just go in order. David, find someone that's on this committee that can send you the PDF to make sure you have a copy of it. We're then going to spend some time going through memorial approaches, and we will use a poll here on Zoom to ask you all to respond to that poll. I know that some of you are in pairs, so one person will get to answer in the poll, the other person will have to answer in the chat. You can draw straws, that is up to you, but ideally we would like to be able to hear from everybody in the poll. If you do not feel comfortable using the poll when we get there, just use the chat function. If the chat function doesn't work for you, say it aloud and we will record your responses. From there, we will then go into breakout rooms as we've done before in the previous two sessions, and there are a series of questions that we will ask in those sessions. Your facilitators will be responsible for taking notes as we've done in the previous two sessions, and then we will come back as a larger group to report back and give a high-level synthesis of some of the overarching ideas that we heard in the discussion groups. Does that sound good to folks? Can I get some head nods, some okays, some thumbs up? Excellent. All right, everybody's still with me. Much appreciated. So just want to remind you all again of the project timeline. I know this might feel redundant, but it's always helpful to just understand this overall project process. Here we are at our third intent-informed workshop. Mass Design Group will now be taking this information from these engagement sessions and starting to fold that into a concept design that we will be developing. We are also in the background in the process working with the committee here to identify an artist and solidify a site that will help to move our concept design process forward. And ultimately what we're working towards is a presentation in mid-May. So you all will hear some updates about this. Please don't think that this is the last time anybody will be talking to you all about this process between now and May 15th. It's just that these reoccurring meetings will probably shift a bit, and the way that you're getting information will also probably shift. So that's where we are in the project timeline. And now I'm going to move into the session 2 synthesis. So again, everyone should have this in their emails. If you do not, please reach out to the committee. But last time we met, we basically took the time to talk about audience. Who is our target audience that we are looking to reach through this museum and through this memorial and through this process? We broke out into our breakout rooms to ask a series of questions, which you all did amazingly at answering. I think it was great to see the number of personas that were developed and the time that you all took to actively participate in that exercise. So thank you for such a productive meeting. I'm sure we said this last time, but ultimately the development of these audiences or these personas is an exercise in empathy. And it's a strategy by which we ask people to put themselves in other shoes. And again, what we all discussed was very helpful. So we ask questions like, what is this persona's relationship to King's Chapel? When does this persona engage with King's Chapel? Why is this memorial relevant to this particular persona? And how might the memorial engage the persona physically, emotionally, and spiritually? And so that was the bulk of our conversation. With only minor variation, all 4 of the breakout rooms identified the following categories as key audience groups. And I'm telling you all this because it's going to be important for our discussion later today in the breakout sessions. And so your facilitator will remind you of this. Do not feel like you have to write it down. But your prioritized audience members were young people, which includes families and future congregants. The second category of prioritization was African-American communities and other communities of colors, both that are local and non-local. The third were visitors and tourists, and that was visitors and tourists with or without existing ties to King's Chapel. And then, of course, ultimately, the fourth priority audience group were current congregants, really making sure that we're prioritizing the folks that are already in the space. So we'll revisit that in our breakout room discussions, but that was one of the summary of the priority audiences. We also asked ourselves, what did we learn about how the memorial should engage with these key audiences through the lens of a physical involvement, emotional, and spiritual? And essentially we were asking ourselves, how can this memorial design balance these orientations? And so it's these types of questions that we, the design team, will be taking, the questions and the answers that we'll be taking into our concept design process. But overall, we understood that it needed to be universally accessible and that there needed to be a centrality of a call to action. Programmatically, we understood that online and virtual content is going to be very important for engagement, and that that's something that we want to maintain throughout our thinking for how we might conceptually approach this memorial, and that centering interorganizational relationships will also be a priority. The memorial, we also understood, should better integrate racial justice and action, and so really kind of centering this notion of how the memorial itself brings into question and into call action and this work for reconciliation through racial justice. Excuse me. And then for primary orientation, both internal and external, some of the priorities that we heard there was, whether or not this is an opportunity to increase membership. Of course, how do we engage the existing church community, and acknowledging the responsibility on King Chapel's behalf to service the community as it shares this story with the world. So again, this is very high level. All of you all should have this information in PDF form in your email. So please do take the time to read through it, digest it if you have not already. If you don't have access to it, reach out to the committee. And if you have questions specifically about that, please channel those through the committee, and either the committee and or the MAS team will be happy to provide answers via email. I will pause though very quickly to see if anybody has any urgent questions about any of what I just went through. And by urgent, I do mean literally urgent questions, y'all. We are on an agenda. Okay, I'm clicking through all the screens. I see nothing but smiles. I appreciate the smiles. All right, well then I am going to move us along. So let's see here. All right, so as I mentioned, this is our third session. Thank you for those of you that were able to attend the first two. We've been having a very productive and robust conversation with one another, and I expect nothing less from today's session. We will run from 5:30 to 7 p.m. and I promise we will not go a minute over. We want to respect people's evenings, and I know I heard 3 people say they have to pack, so we will keep you in mind. Our focus for today is going to be intent and form. The committee has explained to us that we're working towards a memorial that will serve as a site for reflection, a catalyst for conversation, an inspiration for activism, and ultimately a beacon of hope. But the question still remains is, how will the memorial achieve that? So what we're gonna work through today are some questions and some prompts that will help us as a design team to hear from you all how you think that might be achieved, and ultimately we'll be folding that in and translating that into our design and conceptual approaches. I want to just reiterate one more time that as we're thinking about the form and the intent of the memorial, it is understood that there is an overarching opportunity for supplementary digital visitor experience, meaning we understand that there should be an interactive, virtual, and or digital component to this memorial. That is something that can be applied to any concept that we move forward with. So as we're having our discussions today, do not feel like you have to underscore the digital technology aspect of it. Assume that it will be folded into whatever we ultimately decide on as a design team. This, what you're looking at on the screen, by the way, are just some examples of a concept study that we're doing for the King Memorial, the Embrace, all of what, let's say 10 doors down from the church there on the Boston Common, and just thinking about ways in which we can use augmented reality and virtual reality to change the interaction and perhaps make come alive the sculpture that we're currently working on. So that's what this slide is given an example of, and we could do something similar at King's Chapel once we get to that stage. The other thing I want to share with you all before we start talking more specifically about intent and form is that while we are continuing to decide on a location within the church, part of the discussion today will be about where you all see a memorial fitting well into your existing fabric. And so on the slide here, I have two floor plans. One is of the lower ground level, and the second above that is of the upper balcony gallery level. We could certainly identify any one of those locations as a potential place for the memorial. Do we want to put it up in the balcony, or do we want to keep it in the lower ground level? Do we want to align it in the walls? Do we want to put it in the seats? These are all open-ended questions that we invite you all to consider today as we're having our discussion. Also, moving on to the next slide, we do have the opportunity to potentially talk about the crypt level. I know there has been some conversation in our first session about, whether or not the crypt wants to be incorporated in this siting. And so if people want to revisit that in the breakout rooms, you certainly have that as an opportunity. And we cannot forget about the potential for the exterior of this church as a potential siting. So I just want you all to keep those things in mind as we get into some of the questions later, and wanted to present those plans and those photographs back to you a second time, because we did briefly review them in the very first session when we were talking about the context of the existing conditions. And so we wanted to bring that back as a reminder. Last thing I'll say before we start getting a little bit into discussion is that I want to remind folks of the community standards that we established in the first session. We encourage empathetic listening. We encourage you to honor your lived experiences. Of course, we always want to make space for multiple truths. We encourage open participation, so please do not be shy. I think we all know each other fairly well at this point. We've done this is our third time. Just jump in there. Don't be shy. Also be present. Try to avoid splitting your attention. It's very hard to do anyways, so just stay focused, stay here with us as best you can, and practice Zoom etiquette. So that includes using people's names and pronouns, muting yourself when you're not speaking, and having your video on if you are able to do so. Any questions or comments from me from there before I move on? Excellent. Seeing and hearing none. Okay, so I want to present to you all as efficiently as I possibly can a few memorial approaches, and we can also review these in our breakout rooms. Your facilitators are prepared to answer questions about them, and I can also answer questions as I go through them. But what we're going to do is we're going to present these memorial approaches, and then, as I mentioned earlier, we are going to post a poll where we're going to get some reactions from you all about these particular approaches. So the first comparison, if you will, that we have, and the reason why we're doing this, by the way, is to get feedback from you all about how you think this memorial should approach its form and intent, right? How does this memorial actually land in the church? What is the feel? What are the thematic aspects of it? And so we have these, they're not quite dichotomies, but they're comparisons over the next few slides that I'll be walking you through. So the first comparison, the first set of approaches is a didactic approach or a contemplative approach. Do we want something that is laden with information and facts and names and lists of data points? Or are we looking for something that is a little bit more ephemeral, a little bit more contemplative in its nature, and definitely presents an environment for folks to be reflective and absorbing of the information, but it not quite necessarily be presented in such a didactic manner? So that's one set of approaches, didactic or contemplative. Another set of approaches might be introspective and participatory. Do we see this as something where somebody is meant to, absorb the information, understand it from a very particular perspective, kind of be one with it, be present in it? Or do we expect something that is more participatory, such as the A's memorial quilt, which is what you're seeing in the right side image? Is this a memorial that is built by, over time, the participation of visitors? Does it change over time? Is it active in living in that way? Okay. Second or third, set of approaches is personal versus communal. which is to say, how do we expect folks to be able to engage with or interact with the overall form of the memorial, the scale of the memorial? Does it allow for folks to be able to be present with it, present amongst it with a larger group of people? Or is this meant to be more of an individual personal experience, more of an intimate experience that someone takes in at a slightly smaller scale? And so you're seeing these two reflective opportunities, one on the left that's a much smaller, less, smaller than the size of the palm of your hand, for example, versus something like the Chicago Bean, which is massive and has this communal experience to it all at once. The next set of approaches are we looking for an approach that relies on multiple aspects of the design, multiple pieces, multiple components, something that is immersive, perhaps, that requires a certain level or certain number, certain volume of elements to it? Or is this a singular moment? Is this a singular piece that is meant to describe and capture all of the things that we ultimately hope the memorial can be and can do? So is it a multiple experience, or is it a singular experience like the obelisk that we're seeing on the right-hand side? Another set of approaches is a destination versus a journey. And what we mean by this is, and this is somewhat similar to the last slide where it's asking multiple or singular, but it's different in a way, and so I'll describe that. Are we suggesting that the memorial is centered or located in just one place in or around the church? Is it meant to be a destination where multiple people gather, they take in the information at once, they absorb what they can, and they proceed? Or is it something that's perhaps stretched throughout the church? Very much like the Freedom Trail, for example. The Freedom Trail is a journey of a memorial, if you will, right? There are multiple steps, there are multiple stops, there are multiple stories along that. And so would we want to create a journey within the church where perhaps a visitor is starting outside, being brought inside, being brought through the sanctuary, and having to make multiple stops in order to understand this full comprehensive story that we're looking to tell? Or is all of the information in one place, like a destination? Another set of comparisons is open participation versus prescribed participation. And so going back to this participatory nature, right, is this something that we want visitors in the broader community to be able to build together? If so, is it open participation in which we provide a prompt of sorts, or something that people are responding to, an open-ended question that over time gets built up by individual responses? Or is it prescribed participation where it's very clear what it is that you're supposed to do, and there's only one thing to do, and we are able to register that volume of how many people have participated in that way, such as placing stones on top of tombstones, rocks on top of tombstones. It's a very prescribed participation, but over time, we can begin to understand how many folks have actually participated in that way. Last comparison that we want to offer is literal or symbolic. So when we're talking about, understanding and wanting to represent these individuals that we're looking to honor, are there very literal kind of figurative, evocative ways that we want to be able to represent these individuals? Or are we preferring to do something that is a little bit more symbolic, a little bit more abstract, still able to kind of represent the number of folks and the statistics, if we take it that far, but doing it in a more abstract way? So that was a lot of information, and I can certainly clarify if anybody needs me to. However, we also wanted to put up a poll to get feedback from you all about how you feel about these comparisons. I can certainly click through them again, which I will do, but I'm going to first launch the poll. And I want to make sure that everybody can see the poll. So I need to get my screen a little bit bigger so that I can see more folks and be able to read more faces. Okay. So here we go. All right, so I'm going to launch this poll. And I'm going to leave it on this first slide for a few minutes before I click to the next slide. You all will see that there are 7 questions on the poll. Can everyone see the poll? And or is there anyone that cannot? You can unmute yourself and tell me if you cannot see the poll. Okay. Not hearing anybody unmute. So the first question is, do you envision this memorial to be more didactic or more contemplative? And so on your end, you should be able to select whether it is very didactic, both, but more didactic, equal balance, both, but more contemplative, or should it be very contemplative? That is the first question. And once I start seeing some responses, I will click to the next slide. And again, if people feel more comfortable using the chat to answer, please please use the chat. And if you don't feel comfortable doing that, you can also unmute yourself.
Will we be seeing only our own response at the moment, or are more people coming in? We're going to see everybody's response.
That is a great question. What can you see now, Joy? 2 of 35 or 1?
I see 2.
Okay, so then do you see 3 now?
Yes.
Okay.
So I'm
so
seeing everybody's.
Yep.
Okay.
I think as a co-host, you can certainly see everybody's. As a participant, it might be slightly different.
Okay. I'm having trouble clicking on the one I want to answer. How do I do that? Maybe
that's
as
not-
a co-host, I'm not allowed to.
I think
Perhaps.
I think co-hosts are not able to respond, Joy,
Okay.
for the reason that you might be able to stop it or start it. That's one caveat.
Right.
Okay.
Yes. We will get the committee's votes later. Sorry, you do not get to participate right now.
Do we click submit even though there's another question started on the page?
Do you
Once we've made our choice for number 1, at the bottom of my page, it says submit, but I have part of number 2 on that same page.
Correct. That is a great question, Nancy. Thank you so much for asking. No, do not click submit. Just answer each of the questions and then you will hit submit. Very great question.
I think Hugh had a question.
I think that was the question, because I'm pushing the submit button and nothing's happening.
Yes,
suppose
you're
it's
going to
not-
have to. Yep. Great
Yeah,
question. I'm so sorry about that, you all. Thank you for asking. Yes, please answer each of the questions first. So now I have clicked to the second slide now that I've seen a few folks answer question number 1. So now where I'm on the second one, where it asks, do you envision this memorial to be more introspective or more participatory? And so your options there are similar to the first question, which is very introspective, both, but more introspective, equal balance between the two, both, but more participatory, or very participatory.
And
I will-
Jadi,
Go ahead.
at least as I'm looking at the poll, I need to scroll
Down.
to move down in order to see all of the answers to question 2, for instance, and to
Yes.
see the following questions. So folks might need to scroll downward in the poll to see the full range of possible responses and other questions.
Yes, that is absolutely correct. Thank you so much, Chris. for those that do not know this, I am currently 7 months pregnant. And so I have asked my colleagues to assist me in this work in case I forget to say something that seems very obvious. Because anybody that has ever experienced pregnancy or been around somebody that is pregnant, you do know that at some point your brain does slightly different things than it used to. So I'm very helpful. I'm very grateful for the help from my team. All right, I'm going to move us to the third question in the third slide. So please do continue to scroll down so that you can see the full question. And this one asks, do you envision this memorial to be more personal or more communal? And the options are the same as the first two questions, which is very personal, both but more personal, equal balance, both but more communal, or very communal. And as we're doing this, if anybody needs me to re-explain what we mean by some of these terms, I'm more than happy to do so. Do not feel like you can't ask questions. Okay. All right, I'm going to move us to the fourth question, which asks, do you envision this memorial to have multiple focal points or one singular focal point? Yes.
3.
Todd, did you have a question?
You don't need us to say who we are. It's just the number of answers.
Correct. It is just the number of answers, please. Thank you. So the answer options for number 4, there's only 3 choices. It's either multiple focal points, many but one primary focal point, or a singular focal point. So the answer structure is a little different for number 4. And I'm going to move us to the next slide and the next question, which is, do you envision this memorial to feel more like a destination or more like a journey? So the answer options go back to the original structure of
Jody,
Yep.
in where you have 2 of us, sometimes there's some discussion.
Yes.
And you're getting way ahead of us.
I'm so sorry. My apologies.
I also have a question about typing in the second person's answers into the chat. They're just going to everyone. Is that what you intend?
Yes, no, that's fine. Open answers. We can't,
All
you know.
right.
But
Okay.
if you would prefer not to name yourselves, you can send a chat to one person.
Yeah, you can send it directly to me or to Joy if you don't want to put it in
Okay.
the main
Well,
chat.
the first few have gone to everyone, but thank you.
You're welcome. Such great questions. You all are on top of this. Thank you for clarifying things for each other. This is very productive.
So Todd, I'd encourage the 2 of you not to have to agree. I mean, it's lovely if you do, but one of you can answer and the other can send it to us later if you'd prefer.
But that's what's taking us so long.
I can imagine. That's why, anyway. All right.
Yes, no. If there are 2 folks on one screen, one person gets to answer in the poll and the other person gets to answer in the chat, so that you do not have to be like Todd and Karen and try to come to a consensus. And if you do not feel comfortable putting it in the general chat, you can certainly send it directly to myself or to Joy. Alternatively, we can also send this PDF out and you all can email responses back to the poll in your own time. We have many options here, no worries. Okay, I'm going to move us to the next few slides because I do want to make sure we have ample time in our breakout rooms. So the next slide asks about, do you envision this memorial to incorporate open participation or prescribed participation? And the answer format is very similar to the previous questions, where you have open and prescribed as the extremes, an equal balance of both in the middle, or a mixture of the two as the second and fourth answer option. And again, if you are two people, you do not have to agree, just use the chat function. And then the last question asks with the last slide, do you envision this memorial to be more literal or more symbolic? And by symbolic, we also do mean abstract, by the way. So if you need to interpret that slightly differently, you certainly can. And the answer structure is the same as before. Very literal and very symbolic at opposite ends of the spectrum, equal balance in the middle, more literal, but both for the second option, more symbolic, but both for the fourth. And once you have selected or answered, all 7 questions, then you can hit submit. Oh, look at this. We are at 28 of 36 responses. You all are amazing. Thank you. I think any of the responses that I've not received is probably folks that can't respond because we're co-hosts. This is excellent. Okay, 29 of 36. Wonderful, 30 of 36. Okay.
Jadi, apologies if you were just going to get to this, but we had discussed earlier, and I thought I'd share that, like, this poll is something that's useful to the committee, but the results of it will be shared in our report back. And we expect we might share this with an artist when an artist is engaged, so that they understand the kind of consensus view of what the intent of the memorial may be.
Yes, very great point. Okay, friends, for the sake of time, I am going to end the poll for now so that I can get us into our breakout rooms. We can certainly provide these questions to you all via email if you had not had time to answer them, because we do ultimately want a response from everyone. But I do thank you all for participating so far. So let me end this. Anybody still submitting? We're gonna do a 3, 2, 1 countdown. 3, 2. Oop, Dorothy, is this a question? You're muted. Oh no.
It says error code 5003.
What does that mean?
I don't know.
It's okay. We will get your answers recorded.
Okay.
All right. And 1. That was my 1.
Okay,
3, 2.
thank you. Yeah.
You're welcome. Thank you
You
for
can
asking.
mute me again. Thanks.
All right. Let me stop sharing that. Okay. Thank you all for going through that exercise and for asking very helpful questions. Like I said, we will also be able to send this poll out if you were not able to engage with it, but it is helpful for us to see. And by the end of today's session, I might be able to share generally some of what the trends were if I'm able to kind of figure that out while y'all are in the breakout rooms. But in any case, we do need to pivot to our next exercise, which is a discussion of a series of questions that we'll ask in smaller groups so that folks have a chance to actively participate. Those 3 questions will be prompted to you by your facilitators. And so once you are in your breakout room, please feel free to unmute yourself as you're talking, or you can continue to use the chat function. And I will bring us back together at about 15 minutes to the hour for us to have a little bit of a share back before we end our discussion tonight. Sound good? Facilitators, we're good? Okay. So let me just get some folks reassigned because there were some new people that came in. All right, everybody should have their breakout rooms open. So please accept your invite. And if you have not received an invitation to a breakout room, that is because you are meant to be here in the main room. Kent Wittenberg, I have you up here several times. So hopefully one of you is able to get to a breakout room. Oh, Kent is still connecting to audio. So we will give Kent a moment.
I haven't received an invite that I can tell. We were trying to connect through a different device for technical reasons.
Okay, let me send it to you one more time. Give me 1 second. Do you see it now?
Yes.
Okay, there you go. I always appreciate when people are patient enough with themselves to navigate through these technological challenges. Okay, breakout room 1. I am out of your hair. Morgan, you have the questions, yes?
I do.
Okay, excellent. I will be floating in and out of this space, you all. So if you see me pop in, just ignore me, keep talking. I'm just here to help everybody facilitate the conversation.
Thanks, Jody. Welcome, everyone. So nice of everyone to be here. Some familiar faces, I think, from the last group. But Kathy, would you mind just naming everyone that's in the room for Dean, if you're able? Oh, you're muted as well, Kathy.
I'm happy to do that.
Thank you.
So Dean, in our room, we have Tim Nelson-Hoy, John Appleton, Russ Miller, Amy Meyer, Allison LaRosa, Morgan, of course, Mike Bergeron, Mary Catherine Moore, who still isn't packed, by the way, Catherine Collishaw, Amanda Pickett, Betty Likens, and Kent Wittenberg. And Jadi is hanging with us at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks.
I believe that Kent might actually be in another room, and this is maybe his attempt to connect via another.
Yeah, he's ghosting us.
So it might be a ghost, but either way, very happy to have you all here. My name's Morgan O'Hara. I am a historic preservationist at Mass Design Group, but today I'm just here to walk us through some of the questions that Jadi outlined for us, which I will read again. The first 10 minutes of our 40-minute session, we're going to spend just reflecting as you are moved to do so about a memorial experience that you've had that resonated with you. So that could be at any scale, could be at any location, but we want to share, as you're inspired to do so, what elements of that experience might be valuable to see recreated or perhaps avoided in this instance for this particular project. So a memorial experience that you've had that resonated with you. Amy, is that a hand? Yeah.
My hand is waving. Thank you. Yes, I was thinking throughout this for the last couple of days actually about the Holocaust Museum in Washington. And I went there right after it first opened, and I went in, and there's a device like a little machine that you're supposed to take your passport. And when I opened my passport, it said that, and I was going to be the persona of that passport while visiting, it said that it was an 18-year-old Romanian boy. And I immediately burst into tears because I happened to be mentoring an 18-year-old Romanian boy who was attending college in the United States, who was a son of some friends. And I had just come back from Romania, and they were Jewish. So the whole thing was so personal to me that I actually burst into tears. And I think as I've been thinking about this whole thing, I've been thinking that happened to be a coincidence sort of, but wouldn't it be great if we could make a real personal impact on people along those lines?
Thank you, Amy. John Appleton, I see your hand. But you are muted, however. Do you know how to unmute yourself? Yeah, thank you.
I think I'm unmuted now.
Yes.
Yeah.
thanks.
Okay. At one of the coffee clatches on Thursday, I switched the subject from this, that, and the other to the memorial. And there was so much interest and talk about it. I was so pleased that people were really, energized. But I learned from Ray Harden something I think so important as a theme. He says, King's Chapel has always been on a journey. We were, a Tory Anglican church, and now we're a Unitarian church seeking social justice. That's quite a journey. Then Faye put up this wonderful exhibit of how we've journeyed in recognizing women from kind of, they're not really asked to be involved until they're now. So there's a whole journey of King's Chapel there about recognizing and welcoming women in a way that they should be. So I would like to take those strands and just add this whole slavery thing to it. Slavery was in the 1700s. It was abolished in 1783 in Massachusetts, and there's been a long journey for King's Chapel. We weren't abolitionists, and yet 14 King's Chapel members died in the Civil War. So the broad history here is of a journey of King's Chapel to the present. And I think those strands can be woven into a wonderful idea. I don't mean they're all the same time, but just thinking about the journey. And therefore, I'm pushing for a pathway, a journey, a pathway, where we were, where we are, where we're going now. And that also helps you bring in the thing I think King's Chapel should desperately do is be much more active in helping underserved communities. We kind of do it, but we don't really do it. We're not all involved. And I think this pathway would give us to be more involvement in the future. That's all. Thank you.
Here, here.
Dean.
Dean?
To your original question, down in Washington, D.C., the Martin Luther King Memorial. When I saw that after it opened, it was, I can't remember how many years ago, I think maybe 5 or 6 years ago, I went down there to see it. And the things, I was really moved by it for two reasons. Number one, it's huge. It's huge. It's a huge slab of, it's either marble or granite, I don't know. And it's a picture of him and he's holding a book in his hand. But the thing that really touched me the most was that I was able to touch it. And I see with my hands as well as with my inner eye, but be able to touch it was very moving for me. So.
Thank you, Dean. Great point.
I have an experience with the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, D.C., which is just really sort of a gash in the ground with all the names. So it's a bit didactic, but it's also extremely symbolic. And I don't really know many people that aren't moved by it. Sometimes that combination of the didactic and the impressionistic, I guess, can be extremely powerful.
Mary.
Mary Catherine.
Thanks. I hope this isn't offensive, but I'm relatively new to King's Chapel, and I normally go to the early service, but I went to the later service, and I realized that I have had a relationship with King's Chapel itself as a kind of memorial. So I want to talk just for a minute about that. I mean no offense. I know it's a living community, and I'm so grateful to now be a part of that community. But I do still have an experience of the building and the sanctuary as a memorial of sorts. It's a container. I think it has a powerful invitation in it. It is alive, and the worshiping community keeps it alive. And I just really love John's words about the journey. The chapel itself tells a story, much better story now that we have benefit of more of the history, and I appreciate that. But as I was sitting there, I felt like, how can there be like a separate thing that tells this piece of history when the building itself is like unto a memorial? And so my experience in the church as a memorial, one aspect of my experience, leads me to think about the possibility of the memorial that we are creating becoming a part of the whole. And I don't know what that means, but I would love, I actually felt some sadness imagining something over there that was this memorial, rather than something that became a part of the whole that is King's Chapel.
Thank you, Mary Catherine. That was very observant and powerful. I'm going to pivot the group to the second question for the sake of time, because I think we're running a little over overall, but thanks for everyone's responses. And if there are further reflections, I'm sure we can work to collect them via the committee members. So the second question, which we're going to spend another hopefully 10 minutes on, is how might the audience that we prioritized in the last session connect with some of the approaches that were presented earlier through the comparisons exercise? And I'm actually going to put a link in the chat, which should take you to a PDF. It should bring up another browser window, but you should be able to scroll through those comparisons again on your own. But open reflection now that I invite you to think through the audience members, which I don't have in front of me as I thought I did. Let me see if I can find them. So from last session, we identified overall primarily that the key audience members were young people, including families and future congregants, African-American communities, as well as other communities of color, both local and non-local, visitors and tourists, with or without existing ties to King's Chapel, as well as current congregants. So just thinking through the lens of those personas, do any of the approaches that we went through earlier feel particularly powerful?
One of the things I hear people say a lot is the 219 names. And if you're going to services during Lent, you hear 45 of those names each service. That for members of the congregation, I think is very moving.
Amanda, yeah.
I think something that is participatory and shows that participation over time, like the adding of stones to something, would be very powerful, because then it kind of puts on an equal footing like the tourists or the community members or the members of the congregation that come through and spend time with the memorial and are contemplative and participating in it, and adding something of their reflection that then can be seen visually and felt, if it can be something touched, like Dean was talking about, over time, to show the cumulative participation in the memorialization, I think that that could be very powerful.
Beautiful. I think that's really great to consider. Tim, I see your hand.
Um, uh, yeah, bouncing off that, I think with respect to prescribed versus open participation, I think one of the distinctives of King's Chapel is how close we are to our liturgy and our status as a liturgical church. And I think that some sort of prescribed participation would seem to be very, very fitting to the character of King's Chapel as a community.
That's very helpful to hear. Amy.
I'm thinking about prescribed versus participatory too, and what Amanda and Tim said. Places that have a specific ritual. I mean, prescribed is a ritual, and rituals are powerful, and we know that. And places like the Western Wall in Jerusalem, everyone goes there and knows exactly what to do, sticking a prayer on a little piece of paper in the wall. It's incredibly powerful. Or when you go to the cemetery and put a little stone on top of the grave, it's not that you make something up by yourself, it's that you do a ritual that's been going on for thousands of years. And I think that's something that could have have more meaning than if people were just there thinking up what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Any other thoughts?
I don't know what form that might take, but I agree with what Amy just suggested, that performing of a ritual, and I think perhaps a small reflection of the fact that our church services are a ritual. We use the liturgy. And so maybe even a liturgical overtone or just something humanly symbolic would be a meaningful thing to add.
Allison, yeah.
At the same time, I was really struck by the question of whether it should be kind of a personal experience versus a communal experience, how we interact with the memorial. And I really leaned more toward personal, just because if one of the goals of the memorial is to incite action and conversation, to me, I felt like I would want to have an experience that I felt like I took some, I don't want to use the word ownership, but that I felt like really was an experience that I had in a very singular way with the memorial.
That's great. That's really helpful to hear. You know, I think that we set up those as spectrums to think about how they would interact with one another as well. So Ray, sorry, I see your hand.
Once again, to pick up on something that someone just said, what Allison just said, King's Chapel, the architecture, the spatiality of the place, especially if we're talking about the crypt, it doesn't lend itself to big gestures, to group activity on a symbolic scale. I think something very, very symbolic and very personal is the way to go. And having come late today, I'm not sure exactly what has been discussed yet, but overall, I would say my sympathies go with keeping it personal and perhaps even reverent in some symbolic gesture.
Ray, this is John Appleton. I've already told them about your brilliant idea that King's Chapel is on a journey.
Well,
so
idea.
I blamed you for that idea.
I think, you know, we're part of our own freedom trail. We've come from being enslaved as enslavers to being socially active as enlightened Christian Unitarians. So yeah, well, thank you for that endorsement.
Thank you for that thought, Ray, because it brings us to our final question, which is about how might this memorial be situated within the church? Connecting it back to our first conversation that we had during our engagements about context. So any further reflections about particular spaces within the church?
I'd love to share what came to me when I was sitting in the sanctuary last Sunday, which was light. And I'm not an artist. I have no idea what that means, but just the possibility of light as a form, a medium, is just a thought, so that it could be encompassed in the entirety, a part of the whole.
But that's where the space is, to have a space, except no one can get down those little stairs. So I'm very worried about the crypt. I love the crypt, but I'm worried about it.
I'm sorry, I did not mean the crypt at all. I
Oh.
was in the sanctuary, and I meant
Sorry.
using light in a way inside, outside,
Yes,
in the
yes.
crypt, something that can travel, something that can be on a journey as the exhibit and not be isolated. Thank you.
Yes. That's the problem with the crypt. You can't get there, and where are you when you're there? You know what I mean? So it's a tough place to put something, but it is unused space. I mean, it could be a very nice meeting space if anything was done with it.
It seems to be a year or so ago, wasn't there an accident? Someone, a staff member fell on those stairs. Has any thought been given to making that more accessible? Because if we did want to include the crypt in any kind of memorial, or in terms of our own usage in the future, then some kind of access enhancement needs to happen.
Probably.
How much money do you have, Ray?
Let me count.
I was
This is
not around at the time, but they hired a very fancy architecture people to think all about how to
Goody
do the
Clancy,
crypt.
Goody Clancy did a big study. We know how many millions of dollars it will cost.
We're being folks, we're being sidetracked. We're being sidetracked.
Getting back to the question at hand. I thought at the second session of this group that there was a lot of discussion about having it be outdoors so it would be visible, and connecting that to the kinds of people that we were hoping might see it, such as young people, tourists, people passing by. It seems to me if it were outside, there would be an extremely much larger number of people who would see it. As up in the gallery, there would be virtually nobody. In the sanctuary, there would be.
But I can't stand the idea that we put up a monument outside, so all the tour bus drivers says, there's a church slavery built.
Well, that's possible, but correct me if I'm wrong, but I think at the last session, we talked a lot, and Joy in particular, because I was in her breakout group, talked a lot about being visible, the city of Boston making a splash, being one of the first churches to address this issue openly and so on. And I think to be outside, maybe thousands of people would see it every day, whereas to be inside, maybe 20 of us would see it on Sunday morning, plus the tourists who came in. I don't think that would include young people or people of color very much.
I had a thought just within the last couple of days in thinking about this upcoming meeting tonight. And it, I think in part goes to the idea Mary Catherine was sharing about light in the sanctuary and the space created within the light. That light largely comes in through our windows, obviously, but the windows around the chancel and above do provide for a tremendous amount of light. We have one window in the center that we rarely open, once a year, I believe, on maybe Easter. And it's a stained glass depiction of Christ, I believe, and the resurrection theme. Now, perhaps this thought is heretical, but I'm wondering if that space might not provide us an opportunity here for our memorial, as we're thinking about something aspirational, something that is a journey that has begun hundreds of years ago, and one that's leading us to a future, hopefully, that is just that, hopeful and uplifting, and something that we can all look up toward. And hopefully those from the outside can do so as well. So just kind of a off the wall thought that I wanted to throw out there to get others' feedback. Thank you.
I thought I saw a number of hands.
Pardon?
I thought I saw some hands, but did we lose? Oh no, Allison, I see your hand. Sorry, missed it.
Thanks, Morgan. Yeah, and I imagine that, you know, if the committee gave this direction, that the artists and architects could imagine a possibility with something that has both interior and exterior elements that would, you know, satisfy that desire to potentially have something very public, but that could also tell a very interesting story about, again, the theme of journey that you know our church has been on, you know, a past where maybe we weren't always as welcoming as we could have been, and are trying to be more welcoming now. So I don't personally view this as kind of an either or. It has to be indoors or it has to be outdoors. In fact, as Michael pointed out, you know, the use of window space kind of has both interior and exterior facing things. So I just wanted to throw that out there.
Great point.
I think Amanda had a comment. Amanda, did you?
Yes, thank you. At one point, David Waters had mentioned the idea, and I understand the crypt is wildly expensive to do anything with, but the idea that I heard from him was to use the crypt to transform it into a hall, and then it could be a memorial hall in which perhaps social justice activities could take place. So recognizing that that is probably not feasible, something I'm thinking about now is a memorial in the sanctuary perhaps itself, and then the use of the sanctuary for social justice gatherings. I know lots of churches are used for such things. Could we better use our sanctuary for speaking engagements or community social action work, and then to do so with this memorial present and recognizing it at the start or close with a prayerful kind of element towards the history that we've been uncovering and that we're grappling with for our racial justice or our social justice writ large activities. So this kind of leans into the living memorial aspects, but why not have the living memorial and the physical memorial like come together in a way that's very clear and powerful for moving forward.
I see your hand. Right.
One thing visually that comes to mind is the fact that the sanctuary itself is already so busy with memorials and distractions, you know, the architectural features, the plaques, the busts and so forth, the artwork. It's a very busy place visually. So I would think that anything that goes into that space should be very well considered that doesn't compete with that. Either something very simple with almost no ornamentation or, you know, complication form to it, or I'm not sure what else would work. Something that is striking in its simplicity.
I have heard someone suggest that the enslaved could be inscribed in the step up to the altar, which is that sort of simplicity, fitting right in and all of that stuff. I just mentioned it because I've heard it. Sorry, Tim, I saw you.
Tim, and then Mary Catherine as well. Go for it, Tim.
This is something that is easy for me to say because I'm not the artist, but I wonder if it might be possible to make a sort of two-layer memorial where there would be a sort of obvious communicative aspect that you know you could sort of read at a glance, and then if you chose to engage closer with it, maybe there would be more of an individual or a small ritual that would draw you more in and have a more personal experience, a reflective experience rather than purely communicative.
Thanks. I'm so grateful for everyone's reflections. I've been feeling some fear about all of this, and I so appreciate the creativity and the wisdom. And to Ray's point, this is really what I was feeling on Sunday was we're bringing a memorial, and is it going to sit like in as though it is another among all of those? And that's what makes me afraid. That seems disturbing to me, that we would create a memorial, another memorial like all the other memorials we have. And so I really appreciate that observation, Ray.
Anyone else who hasn't had a moment to speak? I'm sorry, I see your hand, John. I just want to make space for anybody else that hasn't had the opportunity to say anything. Just leave a couple moments. Russ, I see your hand.
Here is a dangling modifier for you. James Freeman, who
there we go.
took us in-
John,
into
Russ is
Unitarianism.
John, Russ is talking.
Yes,
Russ is talking. Morgan has called on Russ.
I'm sorry.
I am thinking that outside is probably a more important spot for us to use, because there is so many memorials inside that relate to things that none of us identify with.
Mhm.
I mean, people we have heard about perhaps, or but we need something that is sort of a gripper into the issue of what our role was in the slavery.
Mhm.
And I think outside it shows who we are. I don't know how to do it, but it.
John, go for it.
Everybody keeps muting me, and I don't like that. I want to give you one dangling modifier for your consideration of the history. I was talking with Sam Perry recently, and he reads the annals of King's Chapel. And he said, did you know that our first Unitarian minister, Freeman, baptized Negro kids? Now, I have no idea if they were slaves or free, but during that time, early 1700s, he was baptizing Negro. It is listed in the annals, Negro, of course, after their name. Just so you know, there's lots of history here.
Are they then a membership role? Were they then members or not? Okay.
But that's the kind of fun about history. I don't know the answer other than it's written in the annals that he baptized, quote unquote, Negroes. So anyway, that's just something to think about in the future. Bye-bye.
Does anyone else have any other comments for the Commonweal as we come to the conclusion of our session? You've had lots and lots of really great ideas. There's obviously a tension between internal and external, or some combination, participation, symbolism, lots of very interesting ideas. Michael, nobody else has suggested getting rid of the stained glass window. I think it's brilliant.
It is.
But we open it once a year, Morgan, and we take a look at it and say, okay, close it up again.
It's still there. Yeah.
Join us again here shortly, but I saw Amanda's hand as well as Ray's.
I just wanted to say briefly, that I appreciate Mike's comment about the window and just that level of boldness. Like, let's run with that with all our ideas about this. Like that level of like bold intensity about like, let's shake things up. Like, that's great. And then also, I hadn't even thought about a journey. I envisioned a destination. That was it. It was going to be one thing people look at. But like the idea of people are taken on a journey, maybe around the chapel or something more like something broader than that, even where they start at a certain point and they journey maybe with us or maybe with themselves in reckoning with racial injustice in New England. I don't know. But the journey idea, I'm very called this.
Do you want to just hear what comes up? Okay. I mean, you do what you want, but.
Thanks, everybody who was in the group one. We're just finishing up our comments and we're glad to see everyone else joining us.
Kathy.
Jadi, Jadi, are you here? Yes, there you are. While we're still regathering, I have to pass on to you the appreciation for the wonderful images you put together.
Okay, great. Thank you for
Because I have
sharing.
nothing to do with that.
No, we do everything as a team, you know, but thank you. Thank you. I had some amazing assistance or leadership rather, it wasn't even assistance from Morgan and another one of our colleagues, Annie Wang, who helped put those together. So I will pass along that gratitude. This is my least favorite part of these sessions, you all, when we have to snatch you out of the breakout rooms and slowly start to close out here. It's always hard, but you know, I think it's important that we have the time that we do have together. And I think based off of what I was hearing in the various breakout sessions, we might need to follow this session up with a survey that will give you all an opportunity to continue to provide some of the feedback that I was hearing. So I'm going to have that discussion with the MAS team as well as with the committee and see how we feel about that, just because I feel like there were so many great things that I was hearing. And if you all had perhaps just a little bit more time with the questions, you could take the time to fill out a survey. We would also, as I said before, provide the PDF of those memorial approaches, those two images side by side to kind of prompt your thinking, so that folks could also continue to take the poll. So in past sessions, you've received an email from the committee that gives you a synthesis of the engagement. I think this time I might encourage you to look out for 2 emails. One will be, please follow up with more feedback. And then from there, we will be able to send out the synthesis, but we will confirm and someone from the committee will let you all know. I am going to thank you all for your time and for your willingness to participate. I think we've gotten more and more robust feedback as these sessions have continued. I'm now going to pass it to Kathy, who I know is going to talk a little bit more about what to expect moving forward. And then I imagine someone else might begin to close us out. So thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jadi. The session that we had was just what I was looking for. Lots of ideas flowing, lots of people piggybacking on other people's ideas and taking them even further. Lots of discussion about the journey we're on. Lots of discussion about the need to complement the memorials that we have now, but not be the same. Just many, many great ideas. I'm hoping that this session is really prompting all of us to continue to think, because that survey is exactly where we were going to go anyway. The committee is thinking that we might need to have another discussion, maybe with mass design, maybe without, but just because now we've gotten to the point where we're really thinking about this and we're coming up with some realizable ideas. We also thought about providing access to an email so that you can all put your ideas into the hopper, so to speak, to collect a broad swath of ideas. That website or that email is already being set up. The name of it is memorialcommittee@kingschapel.org. You will get a link to it so that you can see it. As we move forward, as soon as we have the survey, we'll get that out. And then as soon as we have the synthesis of this session, we will also post all three summaries on the website. We'll keep you apprised of each of these steps as we move forward. We're hoping that the sort of final congregational discussion will occur sometime after Easter and before the annual meeting, so that we continue to sort of marinate, if you will, in these ideas and see where things go. I noticed that there was a little preview of the poll. You could start to see where our collective thinking was. I can't wait to see the whole thing, and I'm sure you can't either. So we're right at the sort of critical moment here, and it's really getting exciting. I guess you can see that we have more things to do. The committee is actively engaged. We meet every Tuesday and Thursday, whether we like to or not. And we try to keep the momentum going. If you don't hear from us, just poke us and we will respond. But I think that we have a sequence of events coming up that weren't in our original game plan, but certainly the momentum is demanding them. So I think we will move forward with another discussion, with the survey, with the posting of the summaries, etc. With that, I'm ready to close the meeting, but before I do, I have an announcement to make, which is bittersweet. And that is that Faye Charpentier, who is right in the middle of my screen, is leaving us. She's going to MIT, where she's taking a brand new job in the field of education with the Sloan School. It's a very exciting opportunity for her, but we are all saddened to see her go because she has contributed so much through the history program and to each of our lives as we've gone through her various programs and presentations. So yes, you're doing exactly what I would hope you would do. Applaud, applaud, scream, shout, yell it out.
She's a jolly good fellow.
So thank you so much, Faye. If anyone wants to send her a message, please do so using her email within the next few days. We're keeping it active so that you can send her your appreciation, your thoughts, and your good wishes. Anything else that we need to talk about? Did I miss anything, folks?
Oh, there's Pat. I hadn't seen her before.
Okay, great. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Stay tuned. We will be in your inbox shortly.
You stay out of mine.
Thank you all. This has been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Be well. Thank you. Thank you. It was a pleasure. It was a pleasure.
Good night.
Good night.
Good
Good
night.
night, guys.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Great to see you all.
Thank you very much, everybody.
Exactly 7 o'clock. Boy, I can't believe it.
Great. Morgan, do you know how I save the poll, or is that going to be saved with the recording?
Great question. I hope it's saved with the recording, but I also screenshotted it just to make sure.
Okay, perfect. So I was just about to screenshot it just in case, but you screenshot it.
I got it.
The final version?
The final version, 32 responses.
Okay, 100% participation. I don't understand why it was only recording that and not 46, but great. Thank you.
No problem.
We got
Thanks,
it.
everyone.
Thank you all. Have a good
Thank you. Bye-bye.
night.
Take care.